Hey there everyone, welcome along to Weir Yard. I hope I find you well on this great day, and today I'd just like to say this video comes in association with our sponsor Train-O-Matic, makers of DCC decoders to fit any and every locomotive. So if you want to check them out, check out the link down below and we'll be telling you a little bit more about them later on. And today we've got another extreme old versus new retro review in this Hornby centenary year. And today it's the turn of the venerable Class 8 diesel shunter. Way back in the 1950s, Hornby Dublo brought out theirs, and we see here an original 3-rail example as D3302. Back in its day, it was considered the Rolls-Royce of the Class 8 diesel shunter, a mantle that, to be honest, didn't get shaken off until the late 1990s when Bachmann brought in their version. After that, Hornby, not to be outdone, retooled and came back in with the definitive, so far, Class 8 shunter. But how do they compare? There's nearly 70 years between these two models. Old versus new. Come with me and let's just see how they really do match up. Looking to the Hornby Dublo model first. In its day, this really was a superb model, and actually nobody else really got it right until, I suppose, Lima in the 1980s had a go. Most of the other examples were inside framed, which really was just unforgivable, given that Hornby Dublo had shown the way so far before. The moulding on top is quite a basic plastic model, it has to be said, by modern standards. But back when this was new, injection moulding plastic to this kind of detail was a very new thing. And you can see there that it's got all of the detail on the doors, even if it is a little bit crude. There's no louvres in those vents, but the vents themselves are there. When you look to the cab, it does actually have factory-applied metal handrails, which is something that I think the manufacturing processes lost their way a bit. I think in an attempt to cut costs, these things later became moulded on a great many locomotives, and then later on some manufacturers experimented with user-applied fine plastic handrails, but they were never the same. And only now in recent years have we started coming back to factory-applied metal handrails, and it's like they rediscovered the lost art which was started with Hornby Dublo. But there's no glazing in those windows, and inside you can see the large Ringfield motor that powers this machine. It does have a lot of power, and to be honest, even though the real locomotives were incredibly low geared and were lucky if they managed 20 miles an hour, these very much were the pocket rockets of their day and were, well, able to do a scale 300 miles an hour at times, it seemed. When we look to the newly retooled Hornby model, though, the detail couldn't be more different. A lot of the detail that we saw in crude, basic form on the Hornby Dublo model is there with amazing levels of finesse and detail. Those handles on the bonnet doors really are separately applied detail. They're so fine, you can see daylight through them. And the handrails above, again, separately applied. When it comes to those vents, not just the vents are there, but the suggestion of the louvres and everything else is as it needs to be. We've even got a fully visible tank gauge there on the fuel tank, and under close magnification, it really is readable. The cab glazing, well, it's there. And it's pretty fine, flushly done. And when we look beyond into the cab, no sign of the motor that powers this machine. The inside of the cab really is a model of the inside of the cab, even down to the control desks and everything else. That couldn't be said of the old Hornby Dublo model. It's also interesting to note that the dimensions of the cab are not quite right back on the Hornby Dublo model. You can see there that, well, the door looks a little bit too fat, and the tumble home on the roof isn't quite right. And this actually was a bit of a theme of the Hornby Dublo models. The moulds were cut more by eye than anything else, so it stands to reason that it kind of, if it looked right, it was fine as far as they were concerned, and actually it held its own for an awfully long time. Long after the demise of Hornby Dublo, it was considered, when these moulds passed on to Wren Railways, that actually they still had the best model on the market as it continued its production into even the 1980s. But we can see when we compare the two, there's just, well, the windows are frankly wrong on the Hornby Dublo model, and it shows when you compare it to the new tooled Hornby Super Detail model. You can see there everything just is where it should be, and that roof rivet detail is quite exquisite. Even the cab door is capable of being opened, so if we push on that you can see it's sprung loaded. There's no such finesse on the Hornby Dublo model, it's just, quite frankly, an indent in the plastic of the mould. Sponsor of today's video is Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive straight out of the box. Minimum fuss, maximum pleasure. Just plug in and go. Pick up yours today. Visit trainomatic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. When we look to the buffers, well, we've gone a long way from when we did the zinc mazoc heavy-duty castings on some of the earlier Hornby Dublo models, but they're still, well, not quite right. They're also not sprung loaded. But when we look to the Hornby model, what we see is fine brass turned buffer heads, and they are spring loaded. They are really nicely done, and they're actually quite strong too. They survive a few knocks and bumps, much better actually indeed than the old Hornby Dublo does, which has a habit of the plastic cracking, and you lose not just the buffer, but a chunk of the buffer beam too. Those steps up into the cab, again, see the difference. Crude, oversized on the Hornby Dublo model. The Hornby model gets them just right, and to boot you can see through them to the detail behind, which is just simply not there on the Hornby Dublo model. At best we get a suggestion of the sandbox, but that's pretty much where it ends. The cranks and the side rods on this model and the outside frames, they are exquisite. This is one of my favourite models, and you can see there it just looks right. Anybody who's familiar with the real Class 8 shunter will know that Hornby captured this really just perfectly. But when we look to the Hornby Dublo model, what we see is actually quite crude. It does have the outside frames, which for its day was quite important. But those cranks and the connecting rods just look so massively out of scale that once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And the wheels behind just look so generic. The centre wheel sets are flangeless. This was common, to be honest, to all locomotives from all manufacturers back in the day, and you can see behind them the 3-rail pickup skates which preclude me from being able to do a running test of this locomotive. The BR late logo crest on the side, it's transfer applied, and as you can see, very prone to damage. It's also a little bit crude by modern standards. The D3302 is far better applied on the cab. It is quite fine, and we have to give it that. It's straight, it's true, and it's perfectly legible. Actually, Hornby Dublo were doing really well with that. But when we look to the Hornby model, the numbering just looks more like the true font that it's trying to represent. And the ferret and dartboard is, well, perfect. There's so much more depth to the colours and finesse to the outline. It's tempo printed, not a transfer anymore, and it really does show. Looking to the front of the bonnet, we can see very finely applied ladders. Not all Class 8s carry these. Later on they were removed when the risk of personnel climbing up and electrocuting themselves on overhead electrical equipment became a possibility as electrification spread. But this particular model, still prototypically correct, includes them. They are really fine. The Hornby Dublo model, on the other hand, well, it does have these, and they are made of metal. That means that they are incredibly robust, actually much more so than the Hornby model, but they're just slightly crude, it has to be said. And we can also see there the, again, slightly crude handrails on the side of the bonnet. They are there, but in all honesty, I get the impression that they detract rather than add to this model. Also visible on the roof, the huge elephant in the room. This is a screw that holds the body on. There's really no effort being made to hide this. The rest of the seams on the Class 8 body are actually fairly correct, but that screw just really, well, it grates. Why did it have to be there? The Hornby model suffers no such issues. Everything's where it should be, and we don't have to suffer that huge screw in the middle. The body on this is held on with a much cleverer way of doing it, which is unobtrusive but still allows easy access to the inside. It also has to be said that the motor on this model, it is very smooth. It's a Hornby 5-pole motor, and it allows some very slow prototypical running through that gear chain, which really does gear it right down. On the other hand, the Hornby Dublo model, well, I can't run this to show you, but take it from me, this really was a pocket rocket of its day. The Ringfield motor was powerful, but the locomotive lacked the weight and adhesion to really apply that power. So this locomotive was notorious for just spinning up its wheels and doing not a lot else as the train refused to move. The couplings as well. These are the old Pico couplings, common to the entire Hornby Dublo range, and in some respects, I quite like them. But on this example, they've gone to the larger, fatter plastic couplings. These were prone to breaking, and also drooping too, which meant that quite often slipped couplings was the order of the day. The Hornby model has the slimline tension lock couplings. I was never a fan back in the day of what was the Triang way of doing things with their big fat goalpost tension lock couplings, but I have to say the slimline ones have really grown on me. I do quite like them. They kind of have a compromise of the best of all worlds. I'm not sure that they're the best coupling, but they're certainly, in my view, probably better than this plastic monstrosity that the Hornby Dublo model has. When we look to the cab ends on these locomotives, it's plain to see that Hornby Dublo had a good fist of getting all that detail in, but the Hornby model, that's separately applied pipework. Also, well, the wasp stripes are there on the Hornby model because that's the model that I have in BR green, but they are really nicely applied. I'm sure that if Hornby Dublo had lasted long enough to start needing to apply wasp stripes, they'd have had a good fist at it. I have seen the later Wren examples and they just seem somewhat blurry. Also, through those windows you can see the electrical gubbins in the cab. It really does stick out like a sore thumb and detracts massively from the model. Cab glazing would have actually helped that by just serving to obscure what's behind, but it has none of that. The Hornby model, on the other hand, flush glazing. Even the windscreen wipers are there. It's all nicely done. Looking down to the buffer beam, we even have the cutaways that the prototype has. There's not even a suggestion of that on the Hornby Dublo model. If we compare the front bonnet ends, you can see so much finer on the Hornby model, and the shape is just right. Compared side by side, the Hornby Dublo model, it's just like a ghost compared to what it should have been. It isn't until you compare them side by side like this that you see those louvres in the front radiator grills. They did have a fist of it, but they just got the size completely wrong. It just doesn't quite look right, and the buffer beam, again, is wrong. Front steps are very coarse, whereas the Hornby model, it's just all right. Back in the day, it has to be said that the Hornby Dublo Class 8 I thought was a really good model. And it hasn't changed since those days. What has is that we have had perfection brought to us at what is actually a very favourable price. If you inflation adjust the prices between these two, they probably in real terms cost about the same as they ever did. So we get a lot more for our money. Old versus new. On the left, Hornby Dublo. On the right, Hornby, modern, retooled, super detailed. I have to say the new Hornby model wins it hands down in every respect. In this centenary year, it's nice to see that the modeller has really never had it so good. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. Share it too. Let others know about the work we're doing here, and stay tuned for more videos on this channel. We're going to have more videos of all sorts, including more retro, old versus new, to celebrate this Hornby centenary year. It's been great having your company. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit trainomatic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, but a special thanks go out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Tepic, Michael Lockie, and Helen Sink. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.